Aloha, and welcome to The Big Picture, where we dive into the people and the projects shaping Hawaii's film industry. Today I'm talking with Ricardo Galindez, co-founder of Island Film Group and a key figure in Hawaii's production scene. From his early career as an attorney, becoming a leader in local filmmaking, Rick brings a unique perspective. We talk about his journey, what inspires him, the challenges of producing in Hawaii, and how we can grow opportunities for local creatives. Let's get into it. Here's Ricardo Galindez. So today we have an amazing guest, Rick Galindez, who is the co-founder and producer at Island Film Group. He's also a member of Producers Guild of America and a board member on HIF and maybe vice president.
I think so right now.
Good. Rick, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good having you. Rick Galindez, that's Puerto Rican? Spanish?
Yeah, Puerto Rican Spanish. My father was born in Puerto Rico.
Okay.
So I am an island
Different island
person, but just different island.
Yeah, island for sure. And when did you move here? You're not from here. You moved here when?
Moved here in 2001.
2001.
Yeah.
And what brought you all the way out here?
Well, my mom lived on the Big Island.
Oh.
She lived in North Kohala.
Oh,
and so we would visit her, and then we had friends that lived here on Oahu, and we were living in Seattle at the time. And so we would visit a couple of times a year, my wife and I, and we had 3 kids in Seattle. And every time we would go back home, my wife would cry. And literally on the plane going home, she would cry. And so finally, after my daughter had graduated from high school in Seattle, she's like, I think we should move. And so I'm like, okay.
Hard to, yeah.
So we moved, and then our daughter ended up going to University of Hawaii. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If we knew you were going to follow us, maybe we would have moved sooner.
Yeah, exactly.
So we moved in 2001. Really just, my wife was born and raised in Seattle, and just loved it here. And so moved here without a job, which, you know, in retrospect was pretty crazy to do.
But you graduated from UW, University of Washington, and you got a law degree.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you were practicing law in Seattle?
I was working for general counsel for a software company. Mm-hmm. So I was more on the business side, and that's what I'd hoped to do when we came here, and then realized that, there's not that many in-house legal positions available. So ended up joining a law firm here.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So did you move straight to Big Island, or you?
No, I moved here.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
Okay. Yeah. And because your daughter was already going to UH at that time.
Yeah.
Interesting. And how did you like law? Did you enjoy being an attorney?
I not really. That's why, I like being in the business side of it. So working for the software company, that was great because it was more business than law. I had attorneys that worked for me, so that was, didn't have to do the boring stuff. And so then came here and joined the law firm, and that was okay. And I worked in the corporate department, and a lot of my clients were high-tech clients. And that's how we got into film and TV, with the investment tax credit that applied to high-tech companies, but also applied to film and television.
That was one of the first kind of tax credits. What year was that?
It must have already been in place in 2001, 2002, because I kind of came into it from the technology side, again, from the high-tech side. But that was in the Investment Tax Credit Act 221, which allowed people to invest in high-tech ventures, but also film and TV. And so one of the partners at the law firm came to me and said, hey, Fox just called. They have this TV series they want to do, and they're interested in the tax credit. I was like, okay. Tax credit didn't really matter to me what kind of business it was.
Absolutely.
But that's really kind of what Island Film Group started, was starting to do the tax credit work for Fox. And they had a TV series called North Shore, and then ABC had a TV series called Lost.
Yep.
They were a client, and Warner Brothers did a pilot called Rocky Point. And so we were doing the tax credit work and being the local attorneys for those shows and those networks. And so we did that from 2004 till about 2007, raised a lot of money out of Hawaii for the networks. And in 2007, the other attorney, Roy Chu, who was a partner at the firm as well, he and I both left and opened up Island Film Group. So that was kind of, you know.
I love Island Film Group. I'm a little biased. I've worked for you guys many a times. Always great gigs. Before we get into talking about Island Film Group and all this amazing resources you guys provide here on the islands, can you explain to me a little bit of how you were involved in the tax credit and these productions coming here? What exactly were you guys? You guys were just kind of explaining to them how our local tax credits work and how they can capitalize on those things?
Yes,
Okay.
that was probably the initial conversation with them. And then the next thing came into how you would have to structure the businesses to utilize a tax credit. The tax credit back then was an investment tax credit, so it's different than the tax credit we have now. So what we have now is what's called a refundable tax credit, meaning you make your movie, you spend your money, and then the state gives you a tax credit equal to, X percent of whatever you spend. If you are a company that happens to have tax liability because you have other ventures and you have income tax that you owe the state, then that credit offsets the income tax. If you don't have tax liability or you have less tax liability than the tax credit, then the state actually writes you a check.
Right.
So that's called a refundable credit. And that's what we have now. Back with Act 221 was a non-refundable credit. You needed to find individuals with tax liability who needed the tax credit.
Right.
And most production companies don't have any tax liability, right? We're set up just to make the movie. So if the movie costs $3 million,
Right.
we get $3 million. We make the
Not
movie,
an
we spend it,
ongoing-
and then that's it. Because the intellectual property, the copyright, doesn't usually belong to the production company. So you would have to set up and structure investment LLCs to bring in investors who
Right.
would then be allocated the credit. And so that's what we did as attorneys, was help structure these investment LLCs in a way that that then investors could come in, and usually local investors, right? Because they would need to have Hawaiʻi income tax liability.
Right.
So there were a lot of high net worth individuals, insurance companies, folks like that, large local companies that had millions of dollars of tax liability each year, and they would invest in these movies and get these tax credits. And so that's what we did as the attorney.
So it's kind of like buying in. If you're a local business, is kind of buying in at a discount your tax credits, and so it
Right.
really did kind of benefit anyone who really invested into those tax credit discounts.
It was a very big benefit. And the tax credit had unlimited carry forward. So if you owed $1,000 in taxes, but you got $2,000 in tax credit, then you wouldn't have to pay, any taxes the first year.
Sure.
But then your next year, if you had another $1,000 of tax credit liability, you could apply the tax credit there. So it was a good credit. It was an important credit. It wasn't as efficient as the credit we have now, for various different reasons. It costs the state more money than the credit we have now. But it was very important, prior to Act 221, we really, I think Baywatch had been the last TV series, and there were little movies coming here and there, but nothing like 2004 when we had 4 pilots, 3 get picked up to series, 2 that ended up, or at least Lost ended up running for years and years and years. And that really kind of, I think, was a starting point of what had been up until now, the last 20 years of film and TV production in Hawaii.
Right. The only reason I was kind of asking those questions is because you see places like Atlanta still running. They don't have a cap on their tax incentives, but aren't they still running in the refund or the selling of discounted tax credits to LLCs, basically? So that's the big difference. Is their state is not refunding through an incentive, but they're doing the tax credits to other LLCs.
And I can't really. I haven't really ever spoken to anybody who has been a proponent of what we call non-refundable tax credit. I think I think the idea might be that maybe to the average taxpayer, this idea that, oh, you're going to get a credit and offset someone's tax liability is somehow better or less expensive than, oh, I'm going to give that company a check.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very, from my perspective, very inefficient, because if I have $1 of tax credit and you have $1 of tax liability, you're not going to pay me $1.
No.
Right? Because you could just pay your taxes.
Exactly.
That would be easier to do. So you're going to pay me, 80 cents, 85 cents, something like that,
Mm-hmm.
in order to receive the credit. Well, the state's still paying out $1.
Mm.
Right?
Exactly.
It's still $1 tax credit that the state is going to basically not get that revenue.
Mm-hmm.
But as a production company, I'm only getting 85 cents.
Right.
So now that credit is really worth 85%
Mm-hmm.
instead of the full 100%, even though that's what the state's paying. So it's not as efficient. It's not as beneficial to productions, and then it's created a whole cottage industry of tax credit brokers, right? So, because they're connecting the people that have the credits with the people that need the credits, which is all fine, but I just don't, never understood why we needed or why they needed to do it that way. And then you run into situations. We had a Hallmark movie that came here really last minute. We had just done 2 back-to-back, actually overlapping Hallmark movies. And Hallmark said, hey, we've got a movie that was set in Puerto Rico, but we're having issues with the tax credit there. Can you guys do it in Hawaii? And of course we said, yes, that's great. But one of the issues in Puerto Rico is that they have a very, I think it's 40%, and there's some limitations, but basically a 40% tax credit. But you need to sell the tax credit.
Right.
And when there's not a lot of companies that have tax liability, I mean, there are some big companies in Puerto Rico, but when there's not very many buyers, then they can push down the price they're willing to pay for the credit,
right,
which then makes it even
50%.
less, right, then less economical for Puerto Rico and for the production. I'm only getting 50 cents back on my $1 of tax credit. So anyway.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. I guess I just wanted to get your opinion. So you really like the current form of the tax credit refund system as opposed to what goes on as far as brokerage and tax credits to other LLCs. You prefer this one better, the structure we have now.
I think it's the most efficient. It doesn't. One of the challenges we have is that this tax credit we have now, production tax credit, is a way of reducing the cost of production. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what we're doing. We're telling studios, come to Hawaii, and we will save you money. We will reduce the cost of producing in Hawaii. Well, that's very simple and very clean, and should be a easy story to tell to producers that have the money to make their movie. If I've got $10 million to make my movie, but I can come to Hawaii and I get 22% back, great, because I could have spent my $10 million somewhere else, but I'm going to spend it here, and I'm going to save money. If you're an independent film and you want to make a $3 million movie, but you don't have the $3 million, maybe you have $2.5 million. Well, the $3 million, if you spent $3 million and let's say you're going to get an average of 20% back, you'll get $600,000 back, that makes up that shortfall. But then you have to figure out, okay, how can I bring investors in to give me the money now for the tax credit I'm going to get later? And unfortunately, the way our tax credit is structured makes that more difficult than it needs to be.
Right. So convincing these guys to let you borrow or invest money and saying, hey, you will get your money back. And they're looking at, well, who's responsible of getting our money back?
Right.
And what does that process look like? And that can be kind of scary.
Well, and it's just the way, yes. And there's some fixes we could make to our current tax credit rules, administrative rules, that would make it easier to do that. And that's really, we do production services for all level of productions, but we also do we also produce our own films or work with other independent filmmakers that actually produce their films. And that's the one part of our tax credit that if we could make some adjustments, it wouldn't cost the state any more money, but if we could make some adjustments in some of the administrative rules would allow us to basically, I could come to you and say, well, I've been paying you a lot of money as a grip on our show, so I know you got a lot of money to invest. And hey, I need $100,000 to finish my movie, and I've got $100,000 of tax credits that are going to come in. And with some changes to how the rules are, I could tell you, I can allocate those credits to you. So that's where you're going to get your money back. And you'd probably be like, well, that's okay. I don't want to invest in a regular movie because I know they all lose money. But if I know I'm going to get my tax credit money, back, I'll do it.
Right.
So that's what we've been working on, is trying to use this, what we think is the most efficient tax credit model, but make it also to be able to be used to raise money for film projects, not just save money for the studios, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. I really doubt the bigger studios say, hey, we're saving $2 million by these taxes. I have a feeling they just say, now it's a $12 million budget.
Well, good for us, right?
Yeah. Either way, it's a benefit, and it's attracting projects here. And let's go back to the administrative things that we are working on. Is that just really, is that a change that needs to happen in a bill, or is that things that can be worked out outside of a bill?
It depends. There's the statute, right, and that's what we try and amend. That's the state law. Usually, in state laws, and there are either provisions or that look to the tax department to create rules, and the rules are a separate set of their rules. They're kind of like laws. You've got the statute for the tax credit, then you've got the administrative rules that go along with that tax credit. And there's a process by how those rules are developed, and you have public comment, and there's a whole thing to get these rules in place. So some of these things we want done that we want changed can be effectuated by a change in the rules.
Okay. And
so that's theoretically could be an easier process.
Sure.
Because once, if the Department of Taxation and the administration says, we think this is a good idea, then you help them propose rules. They put the rules out for comment. People testify, kind of like in the hearings. They say, I like this rule, I don't like this rule. And then ultimately, if it all lines up, then the rules are passed. And so now we have administrative rules that work in conjunction with the statute to effectuate what we would like to see.
Absolutely. There are a lot of things going on right now. And one of the reasons why I asked for you to be on this podcast is I saw you give a great testimony at one of the hearings for SB 32. And that is kind of, it's kind of an improvement or changes being made to our current tax incentive bill, right?
Correct.
And one of those things in there that maybe you was referring to, because you said this in your testimony as well, right? If we can kind of clean up some of that administrative process, that'll help attract more investors and companies to shoot their films out here. What is the most important thing on this bill for you personally, as being someone so vested into our Hawaii industry, and then even from a professional point of view of being a producer?
It's a good question. It's a little hard because, as you know, in this legislative process, we start with bills that have all sorts of different things in it, and then it gets narrowed down to these things, and then it goes to a different committee and new things get added. So sometimes when people say, oh, bill number such and such, I have to think where are we now with that bill, because it used to be this and now it's this. I would say the most important things that we have to address, well, backing up, I don't think anybody would argue with, the larger the tax credit is, and the larger our cap is. We didn't used to have a cap on the program, but if you're going to have a cap as to the total credits you're going to do, the more we have, the better. It's
the more
like,
attractive.
Right. It's just like a sale. The bigger the sale, the more you're going to sell. Right.
And it's more than that. It's about being competitive. Unfortunately, now there's a huge market for these tax credits, like Atlanta, New Mexico. I hate to, mention international, competition.
Yeah.
But just in the national arena, we got to compete against other people's tax incentives, caps, non-caps, and
right.
so.
Yeah. So we don't really, if we're going to be in this game, if we're going to be in this industry, maybe that's a better word for it. We have to know what we're competing with. So being able to say we have increase the tax credit percentages, increase the cap, those are all fundamentally the best thing we could do to attract more work. Now, at some point, you may start talking about the economics of it, and we can talk about that later. But the more you offer, the more you're going to receive. The current bills that are in place, and some of the current issues, we had as an attorney, I can understand it, but it is obviously unfortunate that at the end of, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, the tax department took a look at our entertainment payroll companies, and said, oh, you guys should have been collecting general excise tax on the entire invoice. Now, most of us would assume that wouldn't be the case, right? If, I guess backing up, most productions don't hire crew people directly, right? You get your checks from entertainment partners or cast and crew.
Yep.
They're not the production company you work for, but that's who you actually technically work for. So we use payroll companies in this business because payroll is very complex, thanks to the unions.
Yeah.
We have a lot of different fringe benefits. We have meal penalties. Yeah. You've got all sorts of things that are very complex. So we use these specialized companies, so we don't have to create that every time. So those companies had been working for years, and they would say, okay, they give us an invoice and said, here's all the grips we paid, and it's $10,000 invoice, and we have a 1% fee on it or 2% fee, and pay the invoice. We're like, oh, great. And they would usually charge us general excise tax on their fee, not on the $10,000 of wages that they paid, right?
Really?
Well, Department of Taxation came back and said, wait a minute, you're just another business. There is no exemption for you not to charge general excise tax on the actual payroll that you paid.
Like it's their revenue,
right,
or something, right?
No. So the full $10,000 should be subject to general excise tax.
Right. It's accounting numbers to them, but to the state, it's looking like they're treating it like revenue numbers that it needs to be.
Yeah, and legally, when you read the statute, the Department of Taxation was correct. Like there was no exemption for these payroll companies. But what does that do then? That adds 4.712% to your payroll costs.
4.7?
Well, it's 4.5, but you pay GE on your GE.
So they now would have to ask for their fee, their 1 or 2%, but then also be responsible for paying for that 4.5%.
Right. And they would pass that on to production. So that basically, round numbers, that just increased payroll costs in Hawaii by 5%.
Do they do that anywhere else that you know of? Or is that a general practice that payroll companies get taxed on?
General practice where? Like
any other state, is any other state basically taxing their payroll companies like that?
Most states do not charge a sales tax or general excise tax on services. Hawaii is one of the few that does. So most places, like in California, you may pay 10% sales tax, but that's only on physical items you buy.
Right.
You don't pay it on anything else, but in Hawaii you do.
And so that's one of the things in the bill, the current bill, we're trying to get change where
to provide an exemption for entertainment payroll companies to say, look, you don't have to pay, or you don't have to charge general excise tax on your invoice. And that, that one thing that happened sent shockwaves, on the mainland to the studios, because all they hear is, our payroll costs just went up by 5% if we go to Hawaii.
Right.
And notwithstanding we're getting, we're going to get our tax credit, our 22% or 27% back. That's a huge increase.
Yes.
So that's that's you asked me what was the most important thing. That's probably the most important thing in this current bill, is to rectify that situation.
And that's been, we can say, kind of solely on that law alone is making or breaking productions coming here. Would you say that?
Yeah, I would. I mean, it's it's just an additional cost. Now, what we have to remind and educate our legislators about, if you're a studio and you are budgeting out a project, you probably are asking your folks to do budgets in 3, 4, 5 different locations. How much does it will cost if we go to Hawaii? How much if we stay in LA? How much if we go to Thailand? How much if we go to, whatever your project needs?
Yeah.
But you're going to be doing these budget exercises, and then you have to be able to say, okay, and what it's going to cost, and what's the incentive, and what's our net number? And then you look at that net number and go, okay, creatively, where do we want to be? But we also need to, pay attention to the bottom line.
Absolutely.
So when you just throw an extra 5% onto your payroll costs, and the person who's doing this high level budgeting goes, well, add 5%. It's what the union rates are in Hawaii are the same as the union rates in California, more or less, basically anywhere in the U.S. So if you're adding 5%, now our bottom line number is not going to look so good.
Yeah, you're out of the competition, basically. Right. And we always have this perspective, I'm biased, I'm born and raised here. It's like, but it's Hawaii, like people want to come here because it's Hawaii. And I truly believe that. And I feel that people do want to come here. The numbers have to make sense. I think that's what they have a hard time wrestling. And a lot of people think that'll always be the selling point. But where we are, especially in this day and age, right, it's like that percentage difference can be saving them millions of dollars. And in our production world, we know everything just has a cost. And if you want it to look like Hawaii in a particular scene, if you're saving $10 million on this taxing, you could probably build something that could pass for it to the general population. So that's where it gets really icky, is that they're starting to find kind of ways with their savings and money of staying in the mainland or going elsewhere, how to kind of replicate what we authentically bring. And I think that's the tough part about that.
It's a tough part. I think there's also a misperception or misconception that the people that make the decision where to shoot, they're not usually the people that come here. Right. So, I mean, this, when we have a shoot and we have, some people that are on our crew that aren't from here, I mean, they just have a perpetual smile on their face. They never want to leave. They're like, what else do you have coming in? I mean, once somebody works on set here, they realize this is the most amazing place ever to work. But none of those people are the people that are making the decisions to come here in the first place.
Yeah.
The people that are still stuck back, I mean, the studio execs that never get to leave the studio. Yeah, great. You guys want to go work in Hawaii, but I'm looking at these numbers.
Yeah.
How much am I going to say, well, I'd like to give, you a trip to Hawaii, so we'll go ahead and spend more money. That's, that's not how it works.
Yeah. And it's really tough because, we're talking about these studio execs wherever they're sitting. And it's tough because at the end of the day, it takes a lot of money to make a movie. It takes a lot of money, let's just say, to make a movie right.
Yes.
Anyone can make a movie. You can make a movie on your iPhone. You can, have crappy sound or whatever. But
right, and they're all about the same length, right? They're all 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours, sometimes 2.5. But you're all making a 90-minute to 120-minute movie. But that movie could cost $1 million or it could cost $200 million.
Yeah. Yeah, and the main point is there's a lot of things that we're working on to get ourselves competitive in bringing work to Hawaii. And so that is the most important thing to you as far as that GET tax exemption. And what is, in your opinion, the likelihood of that happening in this current session?
I think it is one of the most important things. Unfortunately, it's something that's, it's not really improving. It's filling the hole that we dug ourselves into, right? 2 years ago, we weren't even worried about this. And now this has become our big problem, just to get back to where we were 2 years ago. So,
on top of the other things that we've been fighting for.
Right. So I would say the next thing would be the proposal for the 5% increase on the tax credit with 80% local hire.
20 to 27%?
Right. So
Okay.
it ended up being 27% here and 32% on the neighbor islands.
And that's pretty competitive. Like, I know, is Atlanta up to 40%? Or what is a competitive rate for an incentive?
I will say it's more competitive. It's very difficult to compare tax credits apples to apples because there are a lot of things like we talked about, refundability versus not. Some have caps on above the line. Some don't even give you, some states don't even have any tax credits to apply to above the line. So it's I'm sure there's somebody that's got this great spreadsheet matrix that they can, they know what's going to qualify for. Yeah. What we've always said for our credit, which has been one of the selling points, has been this is a very easy credit. We don't have many exclusions. So you can take your budget and you can apply, if you want to be conservative, apply 20% instead of 22%, and you're going to be pretty close. And you might even be pleasantly surprised that you qualify for more. So adding another 5% definitely makes us more competitive. And really, the competitive thing also, because you were talking about how people can build sets, people can rewrite scripts. If you're a screenwriter and you want to sell a script, where are you going to set your story?
In my bedroom with one window.
Right. But if you're going to be outside and there's only so many movies that are going to fit our location.
Yes.
They're going to be amazing looking movies, but there's you wouldn't sell this big, inner city crime movie, whatever, and say, oh, we're going to should it in Hawaii because it's like, well, why? I shoot it in New York or Toronto or Vancouver, whatever. So there's only going to be a certain number of projects that, would reasonably be made here. And of those projects, you also have to have an incentive that is appreciated enough or is enough that as a writer, you're going to be, I'm going to write a movie set in even just a tropical location. Forget saying it's Hawaii, but even a tropical location. So, we are trying to encourage studios to shoot projects they already have. We're trying to have an incentive that's attractive enough that if you're a writer, you'll write a script.
Exactly.
Because you want it shot here. And that you think you have a decent chance that somebody would say, yeah.
Right. So you're saying, that can have even a bigger effect of creatives in general is in the profession of writing and getting your thing sold. The attempt to write something in Hawaii diminishes because you already know in the talent, it's going to be a hard thing to sell. The budget for a Hawaii movie is already very high, which is also sad because that kind of is killing people's creative process right from the get-go.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I think the 5% increase is great. Any increase is great. Devil's in the details. When you say 5% local hire, what does that mean? Is that payroll? Is that number of days worked?
Right.
What's local? How do you prove that? We're going to make everybody sign, and some states they do. You have to sign a residency affidavit. I am a resident. And there's a difference legally between resident and local. Just because you live here, you might not technically be a resident, but you do live here. So anyway, devil's in the details.
Right.
But if we can get a 5% increase. And then also details matter too, because if it's too restrictive, it's kind of like when you look at a coupon and it says, oh, you get 50% off. And then you read the fine print and you're like, oh, I got to do this and I got to do this. I got to do this. So one of the challenges in making like a 5% increase, very specific, like we want to increase, we all want to increase local above the line. We all want to increase local keys. We all want that. But if you make it a requirement of the 5%, and somebody is trying to, back at the studio is going to greenlight a movie for next year, they're like, how do I know what else is going to be going on in Hawaii next year? Am I going to be able to meet whatever, if we have very specific standards? Do I know I'm going to be able to meet those specific standards? If I don't know I'm going to, then I can't really put that extra 5% in my budget because I may not be able to hit it. So then now that incentive isn't really an incentive anymore because they're only going to be looking at the 22% they know they can get, and maybe they'll get the extra 5% if, and then it's like, now it's now it's one of those incentives that it's like, well, if I get it, great. If not, I wasn't counting on it. And then the question is, well, then was it really an incentive?
Right.
So that's the problem with kind of defining kind of how we implement the 5%.
Right. And I definitely see the argument, whether it's the state making the argument or maybe local workers or just general Hawaii citizens, of being clear with the incentives, being in the details as far as we need to make sure that we're hiring local people. It's like, I think there is that perception of bigger studios, Hollywood, let's just say Hollywood, taking advantage of Hawaii.
Sure.
As much as we want to give, we want to be competitive, like I know we don't want to be taken advantage of, and that's, I think, because it does sound easy, right? Like, guys, let's just get this done, not make it too complicated so that we can have work here. But, you open that door sometimes without enough detail, and there'll be nothing against lawyers. There'll be lawyers that find a way in, So that's kind of, I think, the voices you hear wanting to have that real strict guidelines, right?
Right. And what's important, and that's fine. What's important is that there be enough people at the table so that the people who end up making those decisions or passing out the final bill are aware of what they're doing, right? It's okay to say, look, we understand that this bill is going to be pretty prescriptive, and you know what, maybe it's really not even going to be seen as an incentive by the big studios. Maybe what this is really going to do is help our smaller local films and maybe they're already hiring over 80%. Mm-hmm. But this is going to give them a bigger tax credit.
Yes.
So we're going to target the local films that maybe already are doing this as a way to give them more money.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not necessarily an incentive for the mainland production companies, but you need to be clear about that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people will go, well, wait a minute, I thought we were, I know you like working on our small little local films, but you probably also like to get the check from the big movies that come in every now and then.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
It's that balance, right?
And I always try to tell people that it's like, it's beneficial to have both, and I know we spoke about on this podcast before, I've seen so many people gain such experience in these bigger shows, right? They have the budget for them. They're working very safely, meaning they have the budget to hire a full crew. They have the budget to bring in the proper equipment, not just jerry-rigging something or going with a piece of equipment that is less functional because it's cheaper. So they're bringing in all the up-to-date equipment. People locally are getting their eyes on these new things, whether it's camera heads or cameras in general, right? And now we as locals have experience in that field. Now, when we have the opportunity to do short films, lower budget things, passion projects, we're bringing that same knowledge to your small little short film, and that's great. Like the value you're gonna get in your low budget short film is gonna be huge due to the constant work that these bigger studios bring in. So I don't really like when people want to say, hey, we just need to go into more independent film and self-sustainability in Hawaii. I love that. That's great, but we cannot we cannot stop fighting for these bigger movies, these bigger productions to come down here, because that's how we learn so much. And they're the biggest injection of money into our economy comparatively to all the other projects.
Yeah. No, I think that's important. And I think that's something that, again, kind of, we need both. And sometimes we see legislation that is like, we want to do local and cultural films and support our local filmmakers, and absolutely. But that's not an industry. That is a part of an industry that would be, to your point, supported by the training and the infrastructure and the equipment and all of that comes with the larger productions. I think the other thing, and I'm not sure I've talked to anybody about this before.
Oh, perfect. Exclusive, guys.
Yes. Yeah. As a production community in Hawaii, we are a little bit spoiled, because certainly for the last 20 years and even before, it has been possible for people to work long enough this industry where they learn all this stuff and they do all the shows, big shows, little shows, in between shows, and they end up working their way up to be in the key positions. That's not normal. That's not how anybody else, anywhere else in the United States, works their way up to be a key. The way they do it is to say, from wherever they live, I'm going to move to LA. Why? I mean, nobody who lives in LA is from LA. I mean, not nobody, but, we talk about Hollywood. We talk about people coming from LA. Well, those people are probably coming from Chicago and, Tennessee. But they moved to LA because that's where people were getting hired for projects. And then they would go work all around the country, all around the world. And that's how they would get their experience to then be the keys that end up coming to Hawaii on shows. So in a way, we've been very spoiled to think, well, I just want to stay here.
Yes.
Because most people in the film industry don't get to just work where they live.
You're talking about me. I've been very spoiled, and I've been one of those, I want to say few people, like you said, it's no matter how many, shows are out here, we still only have the capacity to handle so much. So it might be 1, 2, and on the crazy years, like 3 shows going on at the same time. That's a lot of people getting a lot of hours of experience. But you're right. I feel like we are in a fortunate position where we got to stay here all these years, and that's not how it works in a lot of different places.
And I think certainly on the legislative side, people, they sometimes it seems like they're annoyed. Why can't they just hire everybody here? And why do they bring people in? And we have people that have the skills to do this. And certainly from a skill level, not, I'm sure there's been, for you, there's probably been shows that you've worked on where the key you're working for doesn't necessarily know any more than you know.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I think there's just that misunderstanding that I think it's a luxury for our industry to be like, hey, you can work in this industry. Everyone can work in this industry. You never have to leave Hawaii. We don't want anybody to leave Hawaii. Which I'm not sure is a good thing, because people do get a lot of great experience when they get picked up and go on another show.
Yeah.
But if we want to say we want everyone to be able to stay at home with family, working in Hawaii, then we need to do the other half of it, which is do what we need to do to bring enough productions in to make that happen.
Right.
You can't have it both ways.
No. So we need to basically have been creating a strong infrastructure that is sustainable over time, creating good workforce development in pre and post production, as well as just shooting things here.
So we need to do workforce development, but as I like to say, you can't have workforce development if you don't have any work. So
That's very true.
So if we want to have an industry that is local and people can stay here and do that, then on the other side, we need to have the incentives and not just the monetary incentives. We have issues with facilities, right? We have all sorts of other issues that we could be working on to make this a better place for film and TV, but it's not going to be inexpensive.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
If you just want to stay here and work, and if the state and our community wants people to just be able to stay here and work, then we need to do what we can do on this incentive side to make sure, that we have projects that are in line. Like, we absolutely need to go to Hawaii. We want to go to Hawaii. We can't shoot this month. We need to go next month. Like, that would be the ultimate, right? That's like a restaurant. If you have a line of people or you have a waiting list or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going to mean the product or what we have to offer needs to be so great that people are waiting in line to come here.
Right.
And right now, we're not there.
Right.
So if we don't increase our incentives, but we're also, concerned that people need to leave or drop out of the industry, well, we need to bring those two things together.
Yeah. It seems like there's going to be a jumping off point. There's, and that's how it is in every business or creation of something. You can't wait for the numbers to be exactly so clear in profitability. Especially when you're talking about creating jobs, creating a community, creating people from here, livelihood, passion, right? That's kind of the point of the state, is not to make money, not to see what the return of investment is. It's to create jobs, it's to create an infrastructure. But it sounds like they're not really willing to take, or there's certain people not willing to take this leap of faith, and they're not sold into this industry being a real economic impact in Hawaii, right?
Yeah. I think that's fair. I think there's a lot of different reasons. Some people are just philosophically, opposed to tax incentives. It distorts the market, and we should be focusing on the things that we do better. And know there's not a budget in the world that ever is big enough for whatever, whether it's a film or your family budget or state budget. I mean, you always have more things to do, right? It's always a question of trade-offs. I think, as having done this now for, 20 years or more, some of the frustration is, especially with our legislators and even some community members, is it that they don't understand the economic benefit, or they understand the economic benefit, but, if we can get the same level of production to come here, but we don't have to increase the credit, then we win, right? We make more money to spend somewhere else, right? And I guess that's always going to be the balance. But there is a DBED report that came out in October and November of last year. It was released in February, so I don't know if I just didn't see it for all those months, but it was the visitor, the impact of film and TV on the visitor industry. And they did this, they surveyed 19,000 people. Bottom line is, in 2022, the economic impact of film and TV on the visitor industry, not the money that the studio spent here or that we spent locally, but on the visitor industry, was $1 billion. $500 million, $500 million in wages, and $121 million in tax revenue. Our tax credit program is $50 million. So even if every dollar that the film and TV companies came here netted zero, like we didn't get any economic impact, which of course is silly, but let's say it zeroed out, there was still $121 million in tax revenue from film and TV, people that saw things on TV in the theaters, came to Hawaii because of that.
Yeah.
Seems like we should be doing this all day, every day.
It does seem
right? I mean,
yeah.
and I get it that, well, okay, but if we only pay out $50 million in tax incentives, and again, not thinking we've got any tax revenue from the actual productions, and we got $121 million of revenue, that's $71 million of tax revenue we can spend somewhere else. I get it.
Yeah.
I get that, that's a little bit of a leverage. But when we have an industry that's struggling, it seems a little weird to want that kind of leverage,
right?
To make that much money, make $70 million off a $50 million investment. Like maybe if we did $100 million investment, and the state made 20% on that, but that $100 million then created $2 billion worth of travel revenue, that's the investment.
And these are huge numbers. These are huge numbers. And it did seem like that after those numbers were produced was, oh, yeah, that's a big number. But you know what? We can't really correlate that exactly to the film industry, right? Because it took us a while just to fight to get that data, was because for a long time they ignored completely the fact that the film industry here has an effect on tourism, right, which the state calls, which it is, the largest economic industry in Hawaii, and everything, and this is my opinion, is catered to that industry, right? Tourism, right. This is our money.
And
right?
when tourism's down, everybody runs around saying, we need to
diversify.
And
they've been saying that for years, though, right? And
but then when things get good, it's like, well, it's kind of like all of us. It's human nature.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think it's unfair to ignore that fact or don't not give it the credibility it deserves, because for us, and it's crazy that we have to explain it for me, because I think it's so apparent. You can ask anybody walking down the street, like, how much of an impact do you think movies and television make on people coming here for a vacation? Like, I can tell you firsthand, like, when we're shooting Hawaii 5-0 in Waikiki, like, the crowds that are around there, and like, they tell me firsthand, like, this is our favorite show. This is why we come here, and to see it being shot in real life here, it's a dream come true for them. So I know for a fact from real feedback that it has a huge impact. And the craziest thing for me is if you look at it, it's probably the cheapest marketing that they're paying for Hawaii tourism. I mean, besides the $30 million they give, Hawaii Tourism Authority for a budget for marketing. Yeah. It's like they have $30 million for a budget for marketing when we're doing it weekly on television shows that will play in syndication for years and years to come. People are still going to Jurassic Kualoa Ranch for Jurassic Park tours.
Yeah. And that was one of the things they said in the survey too, that they did, in the analysis, was that, this was a snapshot of people, the 19,000 people they surveyed who checked the boxes of why they came to Hawaii. And some of that was, one of the choices is film or TV because of a program you saw. So this was analysis based on that. But they said even in the survey, but this isn't a static thing. It's not that someone saw something last month and came this month. This is accumulation of all of the things that people have seen over a long period of time. And that's the other thing that's so beautiful about this is, you might see a movie, they must have a movie 3 or 4 years ago and finally saved up enough money to come, but that still generated that. And I think the frustration, obviously, we all have our perspective of the industry and how to make it better and how to make it work economically. And obviously our livelihoods depend on it. So we all have these vested interests, and I guess it's not unlike anything else, but if everyone would at least accept and acknowledge these numbers, then I think we can have an honest conversation. And maybe I'm saying that because the conversation I feel would be pretty awkward for them to go, well, we just want to keep this money. But that's what it would have to be, right? It would have to be like, yeah, we know we get $100+ million a year from tourism, but we really want to spend that on something else. So we're going to keep your credit low. I mean, they have to reconcile those things.
Right.
And right now they just seem to ignore the report.
Yeah. I do get emotional about that, and I feel like that's a huge part of what we can bring in diversifying our economy here in Hawaii, and not only diversify it, but we're actually adding to the strongest part of our economy structure is tourism. So it's not even a competition with it. It's actually
it's kind of like in the middle, right? It's kind of like, look, we're not doing something totally different, like creating something totally brand new. So there's pluses and minuses of that, because we're still then feeding into this thing that, this industry that goes up and down, but it's just kind of a sidestep, right? It's just stepping over here. And to your point, maybe even thinking about it like we're spending some marketing money that has a really good return. Right. So let's do that. It's kind of a different industry, but it helps our main industry. We should all be happy. Let's go make a movie.
So thank you for going through those things. I think that's a lot of things. It's a great perspective, especially from you as, more of the producer side of things, with your huge law, background, because I'm learning, like I'm just learning this now. I hate to call it, but it's a game. It's a kind of a game that you have to be on top of, in legislation. Like I'm on that website every day looking at the updated bills and what they're saying, because to my surprise, just as a normal guy, there are things, getting put in there that I used to support this bill last week, but this week, that might have changed, because these certain things placed in there. And I feel like that's kind of what happened on SB 32, was the language being added in about a sunset date now on our tax incentives in general. So instead of us fighting to improve these tax incentives that we've been fighting for all these years, they're saying, oh yeah, I like these amendments of maybe, helping improve how this tax credit can work. We'll maybe give you those things if we can kind of get on here that it goes away totally in 5 or 6 years. So now we're like, oh no, like that's not what this bill is created for, and now we're heading to the edge of a cliff, and that's a scary thing. Yeah,
and it's just a misunderstanding of, that I guess there obviously are tax incentives that governments use to, jumpstart this sector of the economy or this industry, and we're going to give these aggressive tax incentives to build some factories, and then we're going to back off, and that's been a refrain from a lot of folks in the legislature. I mean, we've been going down there for 20 years, and every year someone's saying, how much longer do we need to do this? It's like, well, I guess as long as everyone else is doing it, if we want to be in this industry. But to just kind of, not look anywhere else and go, gosh, we've been helping you guys for a long time. Can't you, kind of get it together?
Right.
Isn't really the right approach.
Yeah, and in all fairness, it is a tough situation to navigate. We have a ton of things going on as a state that we need to address. We had the Lahaina fires. We have homelessness. We have education that needs to be improved. And so a lot of times when they look at it as this is entertainment, how important it is, it probably does fall from the list of priorities that they have. And I'm sure everyone, even at the hearings and speaking to different politicians, there's a general support for the film industry. We've had politicians, kids on set in scenes, and they're there and they love it, or they're in scenes themselves, right? And they love the film industry, So I truly, and this is my personal belief, is everyone is rooting for us. They want us to have the film industry here. They want movies to, they want our stories to be told accurately over time. You know, they don't want us to be taken advantage of from outside entities. I do believe that. Do I also believe that it's a little bit of maybe mismanagement or lack of industry insights that hold us back from having a successful incentive plan to build infrastructure here? I think it's a little bit of that too. And really, I love hearing the different perspectives. And I think that's one of the issues of what we have as an industry culture is everyone has their own perspective. I spoke about this before on here. It's like everyone has their own perspective. Everyone only sees the picture from their point of view, you know? And so we got to get together. We got to discuss what are the, strengths and weaknesses in everybody's sector, whether you're a union member, a worker, an actor, a producer, pre-post, all of it, I think everybody needs to come to the table and be able to have those discussions. And I think it's slowly getting there. How have you seen that process? I'm sure 20 years ago, there was probably less people around the table willing to have the discussion, or was it better?
I think it was better only because it was more novel. I mean, and there was a real push. I mean, the investment tax, or Act 221, was a huge endeavor, and and was the state trying to push for tech companies and film and TV, and it was a big lift, right? It was a really big commitment to those things. And so I think it was a little easier to talk about the successes and, why we're doing what we're doing. And not that there weren't critics, and some of them, was a valid criticism of the program. But, I think there were more people willing to swing for the fences, right? And that included the legislators, and it was very clear which ones were on board and which ones weren't, but there were more that were on board. So that was, it's easy to root for the winning team, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think over time, you end up being a little bit a victim of your own success, right? We were so spoiled with all the ABC shows and then the CBS shows, and I mean, there are people in this industry that have never known what it's like not to be working.
Yes.
Or not to be able to just say, yeah, I don't want to take that job, like I'm going to go do something else, but I'm not concerned that I'm not going to be able to have a job when I get back. That was because you had 20 years that was kicked off with this great enthusiasm for trying to diversify our economy. And I think we were kind of a victim of our own success, because pretty soon people were like, well, there's always a TV series here or two, and there's always movies coming in, and do we really need to do any more? Like, we can focus on other things. And as you pointed out, there's a lot of other things to pay attention to.
Yeah.
Right. So,
well, we are currently waiting for this bill to pass or not pass, and I just wanted to hear your opinion on what can be the best outcome moving into the end of this session for this bill. And there's other bills out there like SB 1641, and I'm just mentioning it for the sake of mentioning it, where the state wants to create basically their own board to have it sounds like a little bit more control, and a group that can kind of form more of a clearer path forward for our industry here. That one has a lot of traction as well, and I just wanted to get your opinion on what do you think about Because that would basically, are they saying they want to replace the current film commission with this new board?
I think so. It I think would replace the film office, and would formally kind of bring together, because there's two different versions, right? There's two different bills. I think 732 had a film commission segment to it.
There's a film fund section, right?
But it also had oversight.
Okay.
So it was, yeah. So that got dropped out of 732. The other bill does have this commission that has folks from the industry, whether they're producers, and I think all people from nonprofits associated with film and TV, and then county film commissioners, but only one at a time to serve a 2-year term. And it seems like a lot. Me. It seems like a lot to me when we really have some fundamental and basic issues, that we need to work on. We need to work on our incentive. We need to work on infrastructure, and there is every year, and there is this idea that somebody comes up with. That didn't sound very nice. There's an idea that, hey, wait a minute, we're giving 22%, shouldn't the state be investors in these movies? If we're going to give 22%, we should own 22% of the movie.
We should be co-producers.
We should be co-producers or something like that. And we can try that. Mm-hmm. I don't think Apple's ever going to let you invest in one of their TV series or any of the networks. It's just, this is not how things work. And this is very flip, but, it's kind of, I'm not sure we want to invest in any movie that would take our investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, and that's
exactly.
That's obviously,
right.
Meant to be a joke. But if our tax incentive is designed to reduce the cost, then saying, hey, we'll reduce your cost by investing in your movie really isn't reducing your cost.
Yeah.
That's just
I mean, it just makes sense. If you have 5 movies on the table and you need to give incentives to any of these 5 movies, I think I would give money to the one I'm getting tell-in money in it. And that's just, it is how it's written. I have it right here. And that's part of kind of, when you look at it, it's like, in a lot of these bills, right? We talked about it. You read it and in plain view, it's like, yeah, this is great. Like what they're setting up, I hear it. They're trying to develop something that we can have long-term infrastructure being built, workforce training. Like this thing has it all, and then, but by the end of it, of these other lines in there, you're starting to look as like that makes things a lot more complicated. And this bill overall is now seeming to be more of a blockade to what we really need. Yeah. And developing this Hawaii Film Authority is what they're calling it. It's chaired by DBET, and they have a CEO of Hawaiian Office of Hawaiian Affairs, which is great. They have the cultural influence of what is good or not. They have, the Board of Land and Natural Resources, someone from the Department of Education, someone from University of Hawaii, someone from the county film. There's one member from a county film office rotating every 2 years. So that person is not consistent. That person would be, and we have more than, we have many counties. So, rotating that is kind of weird. And then one member nominated by the president of the Senate, one member nominated by the Speaker of the House, 2 members representing labor unions, which I can tell you off the top, we have 3 labor unions that are very critical to our industry. Mm-hmm. So that sounds like it's going to be rotating representation from that. And then 2 members from the film production industry, appointed by the governor, from nominees provided by film-related organizations. So to me, I really only see 4 seats on there that have input, that have industry experience and knowledge into the input of the business of filmmaking, if that's what they want to create. And that's just my opinion. That's just kind of how I see things. I see it as taking on something that is very complicated in an industry that they are not really familiar with. So
yeah, well, and it would, to your point, it would all be in the execution, right? You've probably read some amazing scripts for films, and then you see the film as it's made, and you're like, ooh, that wasn't what I had in my head at all, right? So kind of like these bills, like they may look really good on paper, and if they all worked as everybody, collectively thinks they should work, they probably create a benefit. One of the things that, that is a challenge as a producer too, is that we have a lot of different stakeholders in what we do. And we need to have input from the stakeholders. Again, my perspective as a producer, we don't have a lot of stakeholders that are directly involved in bringing productions here. Island Film Group's been a IA term signatory since it started. Every project we do is under the IA agreement. But I've never had that, the fact that we have that agreement or the fact that we have great crew people has never brought a project to Hawaii. It's a necessary component. And I absolutely go out and tell everybody that I can when we're out talking to people about Hawaii. We've got the best crew in the world. And I'd say one of the things that we talked about earlier, they don't travel. They don't. So the same person that works on your Hallmark movie is going to go work on your $200 million movie, is going to go work on your TV series. They have amazing experience. We've got a mixed local, so they really have amazing experience. So I pitch that as a benefit, but that is not what is going to bring a project here. So it's absolutely required that we have good crew. It's absolutely required that we have good equipment. But if we don't have incentives and a community that is going to attract the work, all this doesn't matter. So
I hear.
I'm not sure what I'm trying to say. Than
I hear what you're saying, and that is a huge point. And number one is coming from you, who I've actually worked for many times and see the crews that are being put together, whether it's commercials, short films, movies, feature films. It's all local people, and like you said, you're probably, I don't know if there's any other production company that has made that commitment basically from inception of signing with the union and saying, hey, we're committed to our projects being local hired people. So this is coming from someone I know for sure has always rooted for our local workers. But I hear what you're saying is that no matter how strong our workers are, no matter how many directors, actors love us, because they do when they come here, they love our aloha spirit, they love how we work very hard. We can do every job, right, at a high level. But unfortunately, we're not responsible for bringing the jobs here or getting the jobs here. Now, having said that, who is supposed to be bringing jobs here? Like when we say bringing jobs here, is it someone at the state calling up movie companies saying, hey, so what you guys got on the slate? Like, is there anything, is that someone's responsibility? Is that the film commissioner's responsibility to go out and sell Hawaii as a filmmaking location?
I think the answer should be yes. I mean, I guess the answer is yes. Okay. I don't know, we used to joke, mainly because we were bragging, but that, prior to COVID, Island Film Group, we go to the American film market, we'd go to Sundance, we'd go to Toronto, we'd go to Focus, which is a trade, film and TV trade show in London. We are members of AICP, the Association for Commercial Producers. We go to the show in New York. So we were out there. We had a bigger travel and marketing budget than the State Film Office, and we were one company. Now, obviously, we're out there promoting ourselves.
Yes.
But part of promoting ourselves is promoting Hawaii, because we can't just say, hey, we're great.
Yeah.
You have to say, well, we've got great resources, we've got great crew, we've got great incentives. So we were out doing the promotion, more promotion for the state than most of the other county commissioners and film commissioners had the opportunity to do. And nothing against them, but they did not have the budget to go do that. And I think part of it was kind of this whole, well, people are going to come to us and whatever. So yes, our state and county commissioners do go out and promote Hawaii as much as they can. I think they should be given a bigger budget to do that. And then we have to have the incentives and the infrastructure clear and understandable and stable, so that we as producers can, when folks call us about a project, or we have a project, or we reach out, we see in the trades, someone's got some project set in a tropical location, and we'll send them an email. Say, hey, have you thought about Hawaii? And most people are like, oh, either I haven't thought about it, or I've heard it's really expensive, or I've heard the unions are really tough. And, we have to go through and correct all of those notions. But it really, it's the state and counties and it's producers. And when I say state, that involves a tax incentive. But we are the people that we either, talk to other producers, or producers come to us and say, how can we make a movie in Hawaii? And so all of our incentives and all of our promotion have to be geared towards, getting them in the store, right? Once you're in the store, they're happy customers.
Yeah.
But we can have the best store in the world, and if no one ever comes in, we're not going to sell anything.
Absolutely.
So, I can't tell you how much that I understand the frustration. Look, if crew's not making money, we're not making money, right? Because the only thing we do is make projects that require crew. Yep. So if crew aren't working, Island Film Group isn't working. So we are obviously we're all on the same team, but Island Film Group's going to be the one in our world that's going to bring the job, that's going to be able to hire the crew. The crew are not going to be able to, in most cases, it's happened, bring a job to us.
Yep.
So I think it's, I think it's important that we have these conversations. Thank you for doing this. That we understand that it is kind of this pyramid, right? That it's supported absolutely by our crew and our infrastructure. And how do we then, at the top of the pyramid, get people to say, yes, I want to come to Hawaii?
Yep. And I love that. And I love what you guys have going at Island Film Group. You took me, you gave me a tour of the spot. Haven't been there in a while. I'm always on the HMI side, loading up trucks and getting my gear. Love HMI as a rental house here. One of the biggest, if not the biggest local rental house here in Hawaii. Yeah. And you could say you're probably one of the biggest production companies, if not the biggest here as far as experience and the capacity to do films. Like, you guys have now a good amount of square footage as a studio. You took me up to your editing room where you can do full post-production things. You have production offices. What would it take for someone to get a project with you? Say if someone has a script, where do they start when it comes to your company and the resources you provide here in Hawaii?
That's a good question. I think the challenge and the frustration that I feel also as a producer is, fortunately or unfortunately, we don't have a shortage of great ideas. Right. Or great scripts, or great ideas for scripts. It's absolutely critical that we have people that have ideas and want to put things together and write scripts, and that's the only way things are, movies never going to get made without a script. But the biggest challenge to any project ever, I don't care what, is financing.
So get your budget right before you
know,
cook.
and it's like there's an old comedy bit where the comedian comes out and goes, okay, how to be a millionaire. First, get $1 million. Yeah. And it's kind of like, that's kind of like, you know, how to be a producer, how to get your film made. First, get $1 million. It is that part of it. The fundraising part of it is so challenging. And the truth is, it's really challenging because, I don't know, I'll make up a percentage, but it's 95%. Let's say 95% of films do not make money. They do not make money for their investors. And it's kind of like buying lottery tickets, right? The only reason we have lottery tickets is some people make money.
Yeah, there could be one winner.
Right? There's going to be a winner, but most of you are not going to win. And that's unfortunately true about film and TV production, especially independent films. Yeah. It is so terribly challenging to actually make money from a film. One of the biggest films we've done, maybe it was the biggest, was the movie Soul Surfer, and that was 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And that is kind of the classic story of, we started out, and I think it was a $9 million budget. And it's going to be this, you know, relatively small, independent. I mean, $9 million's a lot of money, you know, faith-based film. And then Sony was going to distribute it on their, you know, to, I don't know, 500 theaters. And then they saw the script and they said, you know, if you get Dennis Quaid and you get Helen Hunt, and if you do this, we'll put it on 3,000 screens. I think that was it. It's only going to cost you, you know, another $10 million. We had investors like, okay, I'll put up the money, right? So the movie gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It's like, oh, that's great. I'm like, okay, we're going to put it in the theaters, and we're going to spend $28 million marketing it.
Which is normal, right?
Yeah, but it's like, okay, so our investors that invested $19 million, now the studio is going to spend $28 million marketing. Well,
and they want their money first.
Right, well, and that's going to be put the movie in the theaters. The theaters keep about half. So the movie is going to have to do, what is that, $56 million just to pay back the marketing. Forget about interest and all that, which they do charge. And it was just like every level was like, oh, more money, more possibility of not making your money back.
Yes.
Right. And that was a movie that was on a successful trajectory, you know. You can't make, you know, I mean, this is before Netflix and streaming, but, you know, you had to go theatrical. Yep. And that was the only way you had a possibility of making your money back. But to do that, someone had to put up $28 million. So this was the best possible scenario, but we were getting further and further less likely, you know, behind, less likely to make money. Now, ultimately we did. Ultimately, the movie did very well.
Oh,
it took, I don't know, 5-7 years before we got our money back.
Yeah. But
we did. And that's rare. So oftentimes you make a movie and you finally make the movie and then it's like,
yeah, and that's
now what?
Yeah, and that's a very honest perspective, and really what people don't understand is when it comes to filmmaking, making particularly movies, right? Because there's the other avenues where marketing, obviously, it's a money generating media, you know, but movies in particular where people feel passionate about telling a particular story, people got to buy into it. A lot of times it's not going to be successful, and that's a good thing for filmmakers to kind of keep in mind. But you guys at Island Film Group do everything from commercials to feature films to what kind of things do you guys really look to produce or like to produce?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, earlier when you said, look, there's a lot of really great production companies here that have been around longer than Island Film Group doing what they do. I think we're different in that we do a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Right. So we started off, you know, our first movie was Princess Kaiulani. I think you said you worked on that.
I did. That was one of my first movies I worked on, rigging electric, pulling cable. At, our start times would be like 1 a.m. Yeah. Great way to get initiated.
Right. So we started in feature films. And then we did some TV series stuff, Beyond the Break.
Oh,
So that was one of the projects that we co-produced. And then we started doing some commercial work. And, really for us to be able to have a permanent facility and have 5 full-time employees, and that, we needed to, do these various things, right?
Yeah.
And so, I tell people we do a little bit of everything. We don't do a lot of local commercials. First Hawaiian Bank is a local commercial that we've done for a number of years, but that's one of those things. It's a mainland agency. I mean, it's a local customer, but the larger budget commercials is what we kind of focus on that side. We've done some music videos. We did a Katy Perry music video and Halsey music video, and so really just about anything that comes across our desk.
And people can reach out to you if they have any questions, right? Like, hey, is this project something you guys would take on? What do you think about it? What are the other resources? You give so freely in your knowledge and your wisdom in the industry, and the resource you provide here for Hawaii, to me, is a huge one. I appreciate having you guys. I appreciate having you on today. We could probably talk for hours, you and I, Rick. And I think
we have.
I think we have, and I think we're gonna have to wrap this up. And I hope this is not the last time. I'm hoping I can have you on again somewhere down the line in the future, where our industry looks a lot healthier and there's projects.
We won't have time to talk.
we totally won't. But I just want to thank you, Rick, for having you on. You've been an amazing guest.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for doing this, because I think it is important. And we all get frustrated that we can't get information out, or people don't understand, and we can stay frustrated like that. But really, the solution is to have shows like this. So thank you for putting it on for coming on to shows like this, so that we can at least share our perspective. And people may agree and they may not, but at least they'll understand a different perspective.
Absolutely. It's truly my pleasure. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.